Hey, what's up, guys? Node Investor here. I want to talk about Bitcoin, some of these markets. Look at that chart of Bitcoin. Just feels a little extended is the best way to say it. So first let's take a look at Bitcoin. So here's a daily chart, and this week will mark 1 month since that extreme low around 1800 or so, we'll call it that. And since then, I mean, what a month it's been, I gotta say. But since that point, well, Bitcoin is up, what is it, 130 plus percent. So incredible move off the lows. Now, from the old highs, it's only up, well, I say only, but it's up 43% from the old highs. So still very nice after that little breakout it had around $2,900. Just pretty much been straight up, a few little pauses here and there, but this is daily. I mean, there's not any big red down days. Now, I'm not saying I want any, but I think it's a little extended here. It feels like it's due for a pause at least. Will we get it? Who knows? Maybe we run to 4,500 or so and maybe pause there. If we get a pullback or a little bit of a pause here, it will not be, it's not going to be surprising to see Bitcoin fall, at least to the 10 EMA, which right now is all the way down here. But even a 10, 15% pullback would not be unusual. If we see it pull back further, it could go down to this next moving average, which will put it around 3,100. I think that'd be too steep. I don't expect it to come that far down personally. But if we did a Fibonacci retracement on this, let's see. So doing a Fibonacci from the breakout up to this most recent top, or most recent point here. I'm not saying it's the top, but just to the most recent price point here. A pullback to the 61.8, it's going to put us right around 3,400, which kind of correlates with this most recent little consolidation here. A pullback to the 32.8 will most likely correlate with this 10 EMA as it catches up. And so that's 3,700 or so. And so that's kind of the zone I'm looking at if it pulls back here. Now 3,700 would actually be pretty healthy, a little bit of pullback, maybe some pausing, and then heading up from there. Will we see 3,500? Maybe. It's possible. It's just there's just a lot of demand right now. There's a lot of media attention, so I would imagine there's going to be some buyers stepping in if it starts to pull back a little bit here. But it just depends on how high it goes too, right? If it starts to get a little too extreme and a little climactic, you'll see a steeper pullback if and when that does happen. Now the question then is, if it pulls back, what should you do, right? Should you take some profits here? Should you just hold, wait for the moving average to get taken out? And a lot of that just depends on where you got in. If you've been riding it from the lows down here or even at 2,900, I'm just going to hold at that point, right? But the question is going to be, what do the altcoins do when Bitcoin starts to pull back? Are we going to see them pull back even further, or are we going to see some rotation from Bitcoin into some of the altcoins to prop them up? And so that's going to be interesting. And personally, I think it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag. I think some of the altcoins that are weaker right now, which we'll look at, will probably take a little hit if Bitcoin pulls in. And some of the ones that have been leading or holding up here are going to maybe just kind of sit tight for a little bit. So just my thoughts on that. So that's Bitcoin. Let's take a look at Ethereum, because that's one I've been watching. Now, if we look at Bitcoin versus Ethereum chart, look at how far this is getting here, and we're hitting a little bit of a low point. So it'd be interesting to see if Ethereum starts to hold up here and maybe outperform Bitcoin a little bit. And so these are the levels I'm watching here on Ethereum. Let me change the color of that real quick here. And so we're pretty close. And so if you look at Ethereum versus the dollar, it's actually looking pretty good right here. So if I zoom out a little bit, go to the 4-hour, look at the 50 period moving average on this 4-hour chart. It's just really catching up, really tightening. And so I'm watching this closely. I'm liking the way Ethereum's setting up here on the dollar chart. And so maybe some money rotates out of Bitcoin back into Ethereum. If it breaks below this, then that's going to be a bad sign. But this would be an interesting little setup right here, because this is holding. This is a key support level here. So one to keep an eye on, see if we can edge up. The areas I'm looking at first would be, if we can get back into the low 300s, 310 would be a nice signal. And then, if we're getting back above 315, 320, you might see another leg up in Ethereum. So it's pausing here, setting up a nice little consolidation. So I'm liking Ethereum here. Litecoin, let's look at Litecoin. That one also has been versus BTC just really getting hammered. It feels a little extended to the downside here, meaning a little washed out. And so I would not be surprised to see the Litecoin BTC chart snap up a little bit here and maybe Litecoin have a little run. But just incredible to see how steep this has fallen here recently. And if we zoom out, I mean, you're going back to these old lows right here, just above 0.01 BTC. So this, you know, ideally would be a good place for Litecoin to bottom out here versus Bitcoin and maybe just start moving back up or outperforming. So keep an eye on Litecoin. We might see a little pop here, and maybe if Bitcoin pulls in a little bit, that may be the signal for Litecoin to reverse a little bit. On the dollar chart again, kind of having this little flag down pattern here, so I'm watching that. It's not looking bullish yet, but I'm just kind of looking at the extremes and saying this is a little washed out to the downside, so maybe start holding up a little bit here soon. So on the daily, it's still not looking bad at all though. If you look at the daily chart, it's just kind of consolidating, moving up, you know, kind of just staying flat here. Obviously, it's underperforming Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's having a very strong rally right now, and Litecoin's also underperforming some of the leading altcoins, right? Neo and OMG and some of these high flyers here recently, IOTA. So just keep an eye on it. I'm thinking maybe we have a low on Litecoin. So one, I'm going to be watching to see if it pops here a little bit. Again, the area that it struggled to get above was that 47 mark. It tried for a day, pulled right back in. So again, that's the level I'm watching. And then ultimately, if we can get back into the $50 area, that'll be a good sign for Litecoin. So let's take a look at Neo. So here's Neo on the daily. I covered this in my last video briefly. Again, just kind of consolidating right now, pulling in a little bit. It needs to rest here, so it's kind of nice that the 10 EMA is holding up a little bit. If we zoom in a little in the 4 hour, the ones that I'm watching here are this 30 EMA, and just, you know, the little trend that it's put in here recently, it's kind of putting in some lows. So this is the very near term, you know, short term trend. That's kind of the area to be watching, but right now it's just kind of up, pulls back. So, you know, nothing too concerning, right? The downside volume has been pretty contained, nothing crazy, no big volume reversals to the downside. Most of the big bars are the green bars still, so there's still a lot of accumulation. And it's just pausing here a little bit. I think it's just resting. It needs to. I mean, it pretty much went from $7, $8 to $50 till it started to pause here a little bit. So it's just kind of nice to see it consolidate. If you see a big green bar moving up to the upside, that may be it. So just keep watching it. Volume's starting to dry up here a little bit, but would not surprise me if it pulled in a little bit more, maybe to this 30 EMA before resuming the uptrend. If we zoom in even more to the 2 hour charts, see the moving averages are just kind of catching up. So as long as it holds, so far so good. It's just kind of putting in a nice little consolidation here. So I'm liking the action on Neo. I'm going to keep watching it. Still holding it. So if you're in it, I probably would stay in it at this point and just keep an eye on it. Don't let it get too much further. If it gets below this low, which is still a long ways down, that'll be a pretty negative sign. But the near term support levels are going to be these moving averages. Let's look at OMG. So let me look at this $1 chart first. So I'm watching this one, looking like it might want to start moving out here. So the 50 and all the moving averages are all catching up here. It's consolidating nicely, putting in this little cup with a little bit of a handle, and now it's starting to move up the right side a little bit. There's a lot of resistance here on the dollar around, you know, this 740 mark. So that's going to be the level to watch, 740, 750. If it can bust out above that, that's going to be a nice move. Versus Bitcoin, it's putting in more of a little bit of a triangle flag pattern, so it hasn't quite broken that resistance. Let me move this out of the way here. Hasn't quite broken it yet, but it's really close. I mean, if you look at that, it's trying to edge out here. Not there. Maybe by the time you watch this video, it will have happened. And on the downside, right, the area to watch is just the opposite little pattern here. So it's getting close. I mean, it's going to resolve itself one way or the other here pretty shortly. So one to keep an eye on. I'm watching OMG. I'm liking it. If you want to take an early entry here, just don't let it get too much below this trend here. Certainly not below these most recent lows on the 12th, so just a couple days ago here. But setting up okay. One I was talking about here was Civic. And Civic yesterday looked like it was about to break out pulling back in a little bit. Still hasn't undercut the lows from that point. I'm not liking the fact that it's kind of now living below these moving averages, so I'd like to see it get back up here pretty soon. If we can get back above this 17,000 level, that'll be a good sign. So keep an eye on that one, but still watching this one. I mean, it needs to rest also. It had a big move up here recently, and it looked like it's just kind of consolidating. I mean, if you zoom out and just look at the daily charts, I mean, there's nothing to be concerned with here. The fact that it's just resting and letting this 10 EMA catch up. So, but this is such a young chart pattern. There's really not a whole lot to go off of here. So you have to kind of work with the smaller time frames, the 2, the 3, or the 4-hour charts here. And that's really what I'm looking at as far as making my entries and trades on this one right now. Let's look at some of the ugly. So Stratus last week tried to have a breakout, and I kind of covered this a little bit in my live stream when we talked about selling strategies. And one of the things I talked about was these big volume reversals or these big wick candles, and that was a good example. And it just happened that day, so I mentioned it that day. And look at what happened after that. I mean, it's pretty much just been selling off pretty hard here since then. It was trying to break out of a pretty nice consolidation off the lows, and the area that I was watching was this little area here, and it had a big volume pop to the upside and then just reversed it all, and since then it's just really been selling off. So Stratus also broke the lower trend pattern that it was putting in here, so it was kind of flagging out, and it was going to move one way or the other here pretty soon, and it looks like that's resolving itself to the downside. So not a good sign for Stratus. I'm not in it, and I'm not doing anything with this. After that big reversal, it was kind of the signal to be very cautious there, and sure enough, that's what's happened the last several days. Another one is NAM. So NAM was one I had to get out of because it's reversing a little bit here. But again, same thing. It was bumping up to this old resistance, trying to break out, didn't really do it, and just recently just started breaking down a little bit. Now volume is not as extreme, but it's still, you know, slightly above average here. So again, not looking good for NAM. You know, my low point was these lows here. Let me draw them here for you, and I wasn't going to let it get too far below that. Not that color. Sorry about that. Wasn't going to let it too far below that, and certainly not below that. So those are the areas you wanted to watch, and you know, just kind of pulling in here. It looks like you're finding a little bit of a support bar here, but at this point, I'm just going to stay out of this one and watch, see if it can set up again or reverse this pretty sharply to convince me to step back in on this one. IOTA. So let's look at IOTA. This one has been in a nice channel, moving up very strongly ever since that move up, but it feels a little exhausted here. But I'm not saying sell, just watch this one. I mean, it's approaching $1 here, and the breakout, it was down at 29.30 cents here, so it's had a huge run, very nice run, I must say. But just keep an eye on this one here. So looking strong. And again, the thing here is, as long as this channel maintains and this 10 EMA holds, I mean, there's really nothing to be concerned about. It can pull back in here, but just watch this this very nice channel that it's putting in, this very clean supports level here. So those are the levels I'm watching on this guy here. But very nice. That's all I got to say. IOTA's strong, and some of you asked me about should I sell it, double top, what's going on, and I'm not seeing it. I'm just seeing just a steady climb to the upside. Looking a little extended here, but there's no sell signals yet, so looking good on IOTA. So that's going to be it. Let's go back to Bitcoin real quick. Just want to share some thoughts. I've seen some good questions on some of the videos. Somebody in particular was asking me a good question that I wanted to address, and they were saying, hey, I wanted to get into Bitcoin. There's certain advisors, YouTubers, not myself, but other folks that are saying, hey, Bitcoin's going to 10,000, Bitcoin's going to 13,000 in 2 years. And the question was, should I sell some stuff that I'm going to use for a business or some equipment I need and then ride the wave up and buy it back later? And so here's my answer to those type of questions typically. My advice is generally, don't invest money that you need or can't afford to lose. Do I think Bitcoin's going higher? I do. And I think 5,000, 10,000, certainly possible. Will it happen this year? Will it happen in the next 2 years? Who knows? I mean, it's anybody's guess at that point, right? But I do think it's going higher. But between now and then, we could see a big pullback. We could see a correction. We could see it pause for a long time. I mean, a lot of things could happen. So just don't invest something that you need, especially if you have a time frame attached to it. Hey, I need this money back in a year. I need this money back in 6 months, because it's high risk and cryptocurrency is very volatile. And so unless you're willing to take a loss or take a big haircut on that potential investment, then don't do it. If it's money that you absolutely need, and you need it all back plus some, then I would find alternative ways to raise some capital to invest with. So those are my thoughts. Would I be buying Bitcoin here? I mean, it could certainly go higher, but it's definitely high risk right now. Those are just, I mean, wait for a little bit of a pullback, even a little pause. But you know, it's just hard to say at this point. I mean, we're due for a little correction, but this is just super strong. There's just no telling. I think there's a lot of money on the sidelines waiting to come in at the sign of more corrections and softening. So I don't think the bull run is over. I know some of you guys are asking me, is this it? Personally, I don't think it is. But yeah, again, you guys know me. I'm not one for predicting what's going to happen 6 months or a year out. I'm going to just read the signals, take it day by day. I have my thoughts, my ideas as to how it could play itself out over the next year or two. But at the end, you know, it's just all guesswork at this point. So until then, you know, we just got to take it day by day, week by week, and just, you know, enjoy the ride. There's going to be new leaders that come up, and we're seeing that now. And there'll just be rotation, and some of them will go away, and some of them will stay. And we're just very early in the whole blockchain assets, cryptocurrency market, and it's just going to have to continue to mature itself. So I think there's more to run, but it'll be ebb and flow. And as all of you know that have been in this space for a while now, these are very volatile. And it's just comes with the territory, right? You have the big ups and you have the steep downs, and they're fast and scary sometimes, but just got to stay with it. So that's going to be it for now, guys. I'll keep you guys updated. Until next time, take care.